Hey everybody, welcome back to the 119th episode. What we do as an intro? Oh, of Taps and Patience. That's how we introduce ourselves. I'm sorry, I just woke up from a nap. I am AJ with Audacity Micro and Subtract Manufacturing here with Harrison of Precision Ingenuity. Hi, Harrison.
Hey AJ, good morning.
I completely forgot how we did intros, which is great because we're doing this live for our Patreons.
Yep.
Our patrons will be visiting us with us here in spirit, but not verbally. So we have access to a text chat, and I don't know if Jacob's going to be funneling questions to us vocally or via text, but he will be kind of curating and coordinating with our Patreons. Jacob says via text, not via voice. So, hi Harrison, how are you doing after that monstrosity of an intro?
Doing pretty good. Better than the start of this, I think. No, it's going good. We're busy in the shop. In the next, I think I got 3 weeks, and I'm going to be on vacation for 2.
Woohoo!
So that'll be fun. So I'll be gone for a little bit coming up here, but that just means I need to get everything done. As I need to get as much done as possible to leave Weston with as little as possible, so he doesn't stress out while I'm gone.
Fair.
So if I can leave him with only the higher volume stuff to run, that's pretty low stress. So, but yeah, no, we got a lot going on. We got our employee and our intern working pretty good. They have both had their first kind of hiccups kind of occur. And thankfully, they were both very minor, but they're going to happen. You can't. Eventually, people are human, and to be human is to error. And we were just trying to keep them in as much of a walled garden as possible to make sure that the errors are as minor as possible as they're kind of learning the systems and getting comfortable on the machines.
Makes sense.
So, and it's even with the very minor errors that they've had, it's taken a big mental load off of both me and Weston. In fact, I think last podcast it was brought up, are they, can you justify having them hired? Or I forget the exact question, but it was something like, are they basically paying for themselves? And I would say from a production standpoint, maybe not yet, or at least not enough to justify any kind of pay raises. But what they have done is they've taken a huge mental load off of us and allowed us to actually focus on the business again. Even if that's helping them getting up to speed and kind of reevaluating how we do things, but also allowing us the space to go in and go, okay, I don't have to worry about something going off every 15 minutes or 30 minutes to go change stuff out. I can sit down and actually think for a longer stretch of time and focus. And the value in that has been tremendous.
That's awesome.
So we're starting to add improvements to the shop again. And it's been so long since we've actually had the mental capacity to do it that it's kind of interesting kind of being able to go back and actually start doing that. So we're going through and we're organizing some toolboxes. I've started the process of getting the Doosan connected to the network so I can transfer files through the an Ethernet port instead of through USB. But I don't have that set up yet. I need to talk to the Doosan tech. I'm missing something, some sort of a connection to get the Doosan to be seen on the network or to have the network see the Doosan. I'm not sure which way it is, but it's one of the two ways. And I've watched some videos on it. It's been a pain so far, but I'll just call the tech, and I haven't done that yet. So I've been trying to figure it out on my own so far. But yeah, other than that, things are going good. And if I have the data, yeah,
don't let the chat distract you yet.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's definitely some stuff that I need to be checking on the machine to make sure it's connected properly, to be able to be seen. And then yeah, we got some other projects that I might be quoting here soon. That's be some more high volume aluminum parts for a new customer. And so I have a meeting with them on Tuesday this week, which will be
Okay.
fun.
Define high volume.
High volume being right now, it would be 1,000 to 5,000 units per year, but it's for a guitar. And if the volumes pick up, it could go up to over 20,000 a year.
For a
So
guitar.
for a guitar part. So,
Well, on my end, I'm sorry. Was that your end of
that
your recap?
that's basically my short recap, and we can get into specifics.
Yeah.
But
Well, and the Patreon Q&A stuff.
yep.
So for my end, this was another week of basically just all teaching. I'm doing 2 classes that happen to overlap. So it's an 8-hour class immediately followed by a 4-hour class. So that's been, I don't know, long days, but they've also kind of been fun days. We basically got through all of the material that I had to cover on Thursday. Well, okay, halfway through. No, yeah, halfway through Thursday. And then it was like, well, we have this extra time. And like after talking to these guys, it was like, okay, the thing they need more than anything else is learning how to solve problems. And it was the way you do that is by doing projects. So I was like, okay, you guys come up with a personal project. Let's do a personal project. I'm here to program things. We've got all these materials. You know, I can teach you how to use some of the manual machines. Let's just go. And for like 85% of the students, that has worked really well. The last 15% of the students were like, I'm just button pushers. Like all I do is load parts. I don't need to know any of this stuff. And they were very uninterested. And I kind of got to the point where it's like, well, if you don't want to learn, I can't help you. And I'm okay with that. But for the first 85% of the students, they were really getting into that. I've been pretty happy with that class and how fast people learned. They were already at the operator stage and they were kind of moving into learning more of like the setup stuff. And so there was quite a bit less like teaching vocabulary or like some machining basics. They did have some weird gaps in their skills. I think I mentioned this in the Discord, but like we went to put a vise on the table and they had just gotten out of a 16-week metrology class. And we went to put a vise on the table and sweep it in with an indicator. And everybody was using the indicator incorrectly in different ways. And I had to be like, wait, is this the first time you guys have used an indicator? And they were like, yeah, we talked about them, but we never actually used one. And so, you know, I had to teach them how to use an indicator, but I haven't had to teach anybody, you know, what do I mean when I say thou or tenth? They understood that vocabulary. They understood how small 1,000th of an inch was, which is something that I really struggle with like my Department of Corrections class. They think they can just like eyeball things within tolerance with to like a thou, but they obviously can't. But this class kind of understood that, and so we were able to move through some of the like machine setup stuff really fast. I think we lost one, well, not lost, but we put some apprentice marks in one pair of hard jaws. We did have one minor crash. It was a call it nut against a part with a incorrectly set input. But the part just kind of gave away, so I don't think there was any damage. And we put a big old hole in the back of a Kurt vise. But in all of those, it was like, well, okay, a little bit of damage, but this was a good learning experience. I guess the Kurt vise was the only true damage. With the hard jaws, I just made him go over to the surface grinder and grind him flat again.
So when you say the Kurt vise, meaning it wasn't something that was like the replaceable jaws on it. It was the actual.
No, you know, it has that like big old 6-inch by 6-inch flat spot in the back. There's a nice hole in the center of that.
Gotcha.
But which they plunged a 3/4-inch end mill through it. But I learned something from their mistake there. Is because basically what happened is they set the offsets wrong. And I had like taught them how to set the offsets. And, you know, I showed them how to do it on that part. But I hadn't taught them how to verify their offsets before running.
So did they like set the wrong origin? Did they probe it in and then just use the wrong probe it to the wrong origin?
They shifted offsets in the wrong direction. So it was an op
Ah.
2, and there was a big old hat on the second op, and we had to use a gauge block to shift the offsets over by an inch. So we would probe the gauge block against the part and then shift it in.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't show them how to jog to 0 0 before hitting cycle start to just make sure that the offset ended up in the right spot. And they shifted Y the wrong way and they shifted Z the wrong way.
That'll get you.
Yep, that'll get you. If it had just been Y, I guess it would have been fine. But Y and Z is kind of a killer.
Yeah. I'm assuming that if they hadn't done the Z, it wouldn't have, even if it was in the wrong spot, it wouldn't have gone down into the vise.
It might have actually, because the part had a big pocket in the middle.
Oh, okay.
And it was cutting that pocket out. So my lesson there was, okay, teach people how to do the thing, but also teach people how to check to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
That was my big takeaway for this week.
Yeah, and that's basically what happened with our intern on his crash, is that Weston was teaching him how to use the lathe, and he didn't look to make sure he put the part in there the right way the first time. He just told him to put it in there up against a part stop, and he didn't check to make sure that he actually had it all the way in against the part stop. So, yep, that's more or less like whenever you're teaching someone how to do something, at least what I've learned when I was teaching them, is that you always need to be there and you need to either validate it yourself before they run it or make them validate it would be the more ideal thing, and have you watch them validate it until they're comfortable with it.
Yeah. For the most part, though, that class went really smoothly. There wasn't really any major problems. Other than that, I was kind of constantly behind with getting programs ready for them to run. Because it's kind of my tune with these classes. They didn't give me enough time to prepare. So I had a couple, programs set up and ready to run, but not enough to go for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I was kind of doing programming, the night before or during lunch on the class.
Fair enough. Good
I
deal.
did also actually make and ship some parts this week as well. I also did during lunch, or when my Department of Corrections class was working on projects, I would just go over and switch out parts.
Gotcha. So you were using one of the machines to run parts for yourself?
Yeah.
Nice.
There was I actually have a video on these parts. They're some little UHMW tiny plastic things, and those parts are 10% making the parts and then 90% deburring cycles. Actually 10% value add and then 90% deburring. I hate UHMW.
Yeah, UHMW is so stringy.
All right, shall we Patreon it up?
Yeah.
Ooh, should I do my Patreon pitch now?
You can do your Patreon pitch. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, Jacob posted the show notes right as I said that. So here at the Taps and Patience podcast, we have Patreons. Patreons help us, make all of this stuff possible. They enable Jacob to put together these live shows, and he actually makes sure the episodes go up both to YouTube and Spotify, which is kind of cool. Our Patreons include, but are not limited to, Kyle K, Devin at Sinister Machine Works, James N, Ben at Prickly Pear Prototypes, Cam S, Shep A at Alderson Prototyping, Jacob at Zon and Precision, who is our editor, Jason S, Joshua H, Christian Z, Dylan at Got Chips, Freaky Climber, Prescott at 1Z, 2Z Systems, Trey V, Guy L, Alexander B, Scott at Design the Everything, Jamie at J-Spec Engineering, Chris Syke, EJ Nocturnal Welding, Chris at Thought Bomb Design, and as ever, Jake Brownson. We also, I don't think, had a new Patreon this week, but we did have Kyle K upgrade from $4 to $10. So thank you, Kyle. We do appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All Patreons get access to the weekly Q&A. This is going to be kind of an extreme version of that weekly Q&A. And then also all of our paid members get access to the episodes a little bit early. And notice I said paid members. That also implies non-paid members. And you can join the Patreon as an unpaid member, and that gets you access to the Q&A. You just don't get the episodes early. Also, paid members get access to our Discord, which is fun and lots of cool things happening.
Mm-hmm.
I would say our Patreons make our website happen, but sometime in the last month, our website shriveled up and died, and our hosting provider seems to have disappeared. So,
Oh, that's
website
fun.
gone. So, question to the audience: if that website was valuable to you, send me a message, because we did spend time working on that and putting like the transcripts in. Even if we did have it relatively automated, there was still some manual work involved. If you want that website to continue, send me a message and I'll make it continue. I don't think anybody used it. So if that's the case, we're not going to spend the time and money to put it back up. We'll probably just do like some quick landing page with some links on it. But yeah, I
So
think
we
that's it.
got all right. We got some Patreon questions live, and so if there's any more that come up, feel free to add them in. So the first one, it was for me. It says from James N. Uh, Harrison, have you thought of buying some type of automation, such as a machine with a pallet pull, since you are into high quantity, low mix? Automation is always on the tip of my tongue whenever me and Weston are talking about improvements to the shop. And I go back and forth. I think Weston is pretty well fixated on part loading instead of pallet loading. And if we can make that work, it makes sense because it's a lot less work, it's a lot less investment. We don't have to set up a whole bunch of pallets. We can just um, load the material up, and the robot will grab the material and stick it in the machine. I think it's going to be a lot more problematic in the short term, but I think the payoff in the long run would be better. But I am less decided on if we should part load or pallet load. I think pallet loading will be a lot more stable because I seem to see a lot more shops that are pallet loading and getting 100 hours of runtime a week nonstop plus on their machines with pallet loading. I don't see a lot of people doing that with part loading currently. I'm sure they exist, but I haven't seen a whole lot of people that are doing that right now. So I don't know. We'll
I
see.
I don't know. I think I'm seeing more and more of both, especially as I have been kind of traveling around in other people's shops.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be all about pallet loading and fair, not against part loading, but not thinking that was the best method because of the reliability aspect. At this point, I almost think it's better to be able to be flexible with it. I think that's kind of more important than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could have like a pneumatic vise that you put in a 0 point or something and be able to part load. And then, also, I guess it'd be a pretty big robot to switch out like a Lang pallet, but I don't know. I think flexibility is the key one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the pallet loading makes sense, especially with the higher volume, because it takes a lot of investment to get a pallet up and going, and if you can justify that with the high volume and just making sure it runs constantly. With the part loading, I think that makes more sense for higher mix, lower volume because it's so flexible. But I don't know. I haven't played enough with either of the systems to know for sure. I do know that I think it was Cervin Solutions, which is part loading, has said it has not been as easy as they thought it would be. Potentially, I think it was him, or it might have been someone else. I don't remember, but someone I was talking to was that had the system said that it wasn't quite as easy as it was made out to be.
A Another good option, and this is a good option for you since your machines have so much table space, is spindle gripper.
Yeah, yeah. Although the first machine we're probably going to automate is the UMC,
Yeah, that's
so
fair.
I don't have as much table space there. I do know whatever system we go with, I'd like to have it to where the automation could be on a Lang or some sort of 0 point setup to where I can go between robot and manual real easy. Between having an automated fixture in there, whether that be an automated vise or some sort of automated pallet system, but even having all of that infrastructure on top of a 0 point, That way I can go back to manually using the machine, putting in vices or risers, whatever else I need to run larger 5-axis parts that might be a 1 or 2Z job shop stuff to throw in the mix.
And there's also always option 3, which is I almost said buy a human. That's not how that works. Hire a human.
Well, I've
And
already hired a human at this
because getting the
stage.
human to do part loading is a whole lot easier than getting a robot to do part loading.
Well, even if they're doing part loading, I would still do 2 pallets and swap them out like the Pearson
Yeah.
method. That's a lot more efficient because I mean, even with that, we've been able to keep our spindle uptime at like over 80%. I think over 90% with the 2 pallet system with what we've been doing. Because if the machine's sitting, it's typically only sitting because someone hasn't heard it stop, and it's waiting for someone to just switch out the 2 pallets.
You need like an R450. I am definitely a believer in those R450s after seeing them at Henry Holsters.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Whether
would
you're
I want
whether
one.
you're loading by hand or by robot, I think that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Oh, we did get a mist collector on our UMC as well.
I saw
That
that.
came in.
Has that actually made a big difference?
Oh, a huge difference. Huge
Cool.
difference. So Weston has a particle counter in the shop to let
Mm-hmm.
us know if the like if the air quality is good. And I believe if you're under 50, it's great. If you're between 50 and 150, it's their yellow zone where it's okay, but it's not great. And then anything above 150 is considered could be hazardous to your health. And there's varying degrees of hazardness above 150. And historically, without any kind of mist collector system in the shop, we've seen it over 400 repeatedly, just because of all the stuff that gets in the air. The first day we got the mist collection system connected up, we actually moved that monitor closer to the UMC and closer to the center of the shop because it was on one side of the shop. So we moved that to the center to get higher readings, and we never saw it go above 50 while the UMC was running by itself. And then as soon as I started bringing in other machines, we started seeing it climb with other machines running. So we're definitely going to be getting more missed aways on other machines to try to keep it down lower in all the other shops.
Nice. We just lost Jacob. Is that going to be a problem?
That means they're not going to be able to hear us for a minute. Do you want to pause for a second and
Yep.
then?
Court.
Oh, sorry about that. Lost you guys for a second. So as I was saying, the mist collectors have made a big difference on our UMC, and we're going to be adding them to the other machines over time. I'm going to see if we can get any kind of. I think we can get a discount if we buy them in bulk. So we'll probably save up and buy 3 more for the other machines, and then any new machines we buy going forward, we're just going to get it from the get go. We're not going to. Weston was kind of frustrated with some of our equipment going just because of all the stuff we're having to add to it after the fact that we didn't because we kind of bought the machines as soon as we could afford it with in the bare minimum state. I mean that's how we bought the Tormach to be fair as well, and then we just kept adding stuff to it. And so I think going forward for all equipment that we buy, we're going to try to get everything that we can think of that we're going to need over the life of the machine and try to get it up front. But I mean that's kind of what you got to do when you're starting out. You can't afford everything at the beginning. And then Foot Pedal Jones asked, Harrison, since you mentioned you think you're getting around 80% spindle utilization on the UMC, have you looked into any monitoring systems like Chatter? I haven't really looked into any monitoring systems like Chatter. I honestly don't know what benefit they're going to give us other than, hey, your machines are running this much. As we get more disconnected from the actual production, there could be value in that. But as of right now, we're small enough that I'm not sure what benefit it's going to give us today. I think it will over time, but it's not really a major factor in business decisions currently. So,
I think part of it is that like if you walk away and your machine alarms out, you'll get a text message. And
yeah.
then which is maybe less of a big deal now that you have employees. But also it kind of exposes the truth a little bit more. Like it's very easy to think you have 80% utilization, but then like you realize that all of the little things add up over time. Kind of like budgets. Like you can think that you're not wasting any money, then you put together an airtight budget, and you're like, "Oh, we're actually spending 25% of our budget eating out." Like,
Yeah.
I think the idea is it gives you actual data instead of touchy feely feeling data.
Yeah. But I'm not making decisions based off of what my UFC's spindle uptime is currently, and how much time I actually have available, because I would need a robot and it to be automated for me to care more about that. Because right now, if the machine's on, it's running, and the only time it's not running is if someone has forgotten to change a pallet. So I don't think Chatter's going to give me any additional information. And we're getting to the point where we're entering the slow point where we have less parts that we need to get done. And so I only need to run it 50% or less of the time currently, because we're in the slow period for gun sales, because things are heating up. People are going on vacation and they're not buying as many guns. In the fall, it'll pick back up. So, and then AJ, they had a question for you that we hadn't answered yet.
Uh, yeah, so it said this was from James N. Do you think you would ever get a lathe? I mean, yes. Long answer short. I also kind of hate lathes. Lathes are scary, and I don't know, they're hard to see into. I don't enjoy the ST10s at school, but I guess part of that is I've never done too much production work on a lathe. Like I've played with the ones at school. You know, once upon a time, I had a little itty bitty Shoreline, and you know, I've played with the 15L, the Tormach lathe some, but like I haven't. I've done one. Well, other than products on the little Shoreline, I've done one paying job on a lathe. So part of it is I'm just not super familiar with them. That's slowly changing as I play with them at school, but I mean, sure, yeah, I would like a lathe someday, maybe. Maybe one of the like the CL1s, or they have those Omni turn machines. Both of those would be pretty cool, but I don't have any immediate plans in the future. I think the thing that would push it to happen is if like Subtract has a deficit of lathes on the network, and like, okay, well, I guess I'll do it myself, kind of thing. But
Do you know
or
the dirty secret of lathes?
they multiply. What? I don't know.
No, they're highly profitable if you can find the work for
Oh,
them.
they're highly profitable. Yeah. Well, joke's on you. I don't do profitable work. The other thing actually would be for creating processes and workflows and training stuff for Subtract. Because one of my big goals with Subtract is to provide our shops with like a ton of resources. And I haven't really done much in the way of that other than we have our standardized tool library, which I don't think anyone else uses. But having a lathe for that kind of stuff, like, you know, for content purposes, would be the main attractor for me at the moment.
Yeah. I will say with our lathe, it has been the least utilized machine, if I even can even say that word right. But now that we're starting to get some work for it, it is very profitable when you get into the higher volumes. Lower volumes, the mills are far more profitable. Higher volumes, the lathes make really good money on an hourly rate and have are much easier to automate.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah, definitely.
but yeah.
All right, Kyle K. As a small shop, how do you decide between reinvesting in the business, hiring employees, or just staying lean and profitable with low overhead?
So for us, one of the metrics, and I think I've heard a couple business books or business guys kind of talk about it, some is how much total gross revenue you're generating per person in the business. And so you want to keep that number high, where each person that's in the business, you're generating a high amount per person. I think the range that I've seen most businesses, just from running some back of the napkin math, Low end is, especially if you have kind of a lower end manufacturing business, think like cabinetry or some other industries like that, something around 150 to 250 per person. And then I think machine shops, typically you want to be in the range where you're over 200,000 generated per person, per employee, whatever. And I think if you're doing anywhere over 3 to 400,000 a person, you're doing really well in terms of efficiency. I know there's others that do higher than that, but as to make it simple, that's kind of what you want to look at. Um, and I know people are for sure doing way more than that per person on the really high efficiency shops, but that's one metric that we've used to look at for hiring people and staying lean.
I have heard like I guess it's probably a rule of thumb thrown around that if you hire an employee, they will produce like 125% of what they cost. So if you pay them 100,000 a year and well, okay, let's say payment plus compensation plus or plus non monetary compensation plus whatever taxes are associated with that comes to 100K, then they'll produce the business about 125K.
Ideally, yes, but kind of combining the 2 points that we're making, if you can make that person more efficient, you can pay them more and you can get a higher quality person in to run that. Typically, the people that pay their employees low amounts don't train them and don't pay them very much, and so they don't generate as much. So you have to be efficient. You have to make sure that they are efficient enough so you can hire high quality people to bring them in and retain them. That's what we're trying to do. And right now we're in the training phase, and we've had multiple conversations that we're going to try to increase our hourly rate of our current employees as they kind of get efficient and learn the business. At least that's the goal, because we want to retain the intern's only here for the summer, but our part-time employee, we're wanting to turn him into a full-time employee, and he's interested in that. And we're going to try to raise his pay as he gets comfortable and takes on more responsibilities.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about like reinvesting?
Reinvesting, one of the things that we've done is we've added another bucket just for reinvesting into the business, just to have dedicated funds that are diverted purely for reinvestment reasons. And
Yeah.
that's just because we've been growing we've been growing so fast that we've been outgrowing our cash flow, or right at the line. And so by creating a separate bucket just for growth, we're trying to make sure we're not taking away money from what we need to just keep functioning as a business. And so we're basing some of our growth purchases based on how fast that bucket grows.
Yeah. I think at least with Audacity Micro, I have always underinvested in it. And I think you, at least from my perspective, it seems like you a little bit overinvest in precision ingenuity.
Yeah, but
But
it's all paid back.
yeah,
I mean, in the long run, like our growth has been, I won't say fast, but it hasn't been slow. There's definitely companies out there that have grown a heck of a lot faster than us. But kind of the conversation me and Weston have had on this has been kind of, most of the people that have come in that have started similar businesses typically are people that are familiar with the industry and bring in a lot of customers, whereas we started out not knowing how to run machines and not having any customers. And so our growth has been slower than someone who kind of came in with all that industry knowledge on the front end.
with Subtract, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I think I've said this a couple times. Like with Audacity Micro is very much a thrown together business, but Subtract is something that has been planned from the beginning. And it's, I mean, frankly, it's probably already a more mature business than Audacity Micro in terms of like processes, especially around accounting and finances. But the current plan has been to just always cash flow everything, and we have our system set up so that it's always cash flow positive for us. But I was talking with Jacob the other day about like, well, do we still open a business line of credit so that we can, use that when we need to, or do we keep a bigger cash buffer on hand, or do we use any debt to grow, etc. Which personally, my thought process is no. It's fine if it grows slow. It's already growing faster than I thought it would. So as far as I'm concerned, we're ahead. And the fact that it's all cash flow positive makes it really easy to invest cash back into growth.
Mm-hmm.
So the only non cash flow positive stuff we have is paying Jacob basically.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else we get paid before we do the work. So
Yeah, but you got to be a little bit careful on that because that's almost a little bit like Patreon, where you get
what do you
paid
mean?
where you get paid on the front, or not Patreon.
Oh, Kickstarter.
Kickstarter. That's what I was. Sorry, I was thinking the wrong thing. Kickstarter, where you get paid on the front end, and then you have to produce the product.
Well, yeah, and this is a conversation, but we get the money in and then we pay the shops immediately.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So
So that is another conversation. Is it, do we wait a week before we pay them? Do we wait a month before we pay them?
there's an old adage in business of never, something along the lines of like, never pay your plumber before the job is done, otherwise it'll never get done. And there's some truth in that, where people will hustle to get the job out the door so they can start that clock on. I know that's how we work, where we hustle to get stuff out the door and delivered to the customer so we can start that 30-day counter to getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get paid up front, then that job doesn't seem as valuable because you've already got the cash in hand. And so now you could do a 30% payment upon, job acceptance, and then the other 70% as a net 30, or upon shipping. There's other things you can do with that. But I think paying it all up front, just because of human nature, is probably not as wise. I understand if people need it to get the job going, especially if they're struggling with cash flow woes, like we all have been in the very beginning. That can be very helpful, but I think it can also create a lot of really bad habits of accepting jobs to get the cash to pay for other things, as I'm sure you've personally experienced with Zometry.
Oh yeah, back when they had that card, totally would
Yep,
do that.
exactly. So it's
Yeah,
it's not it's not necessarily about the intent; it's about the incentives.
yeah, and that's incentives like managing incentives and preventing perverse incentives is like foundational to the subtract philosophy. In fact, I've been meaning to put that in the like our values is no perverse incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of one of the fundamental design principles. That's why why we are tying the number of shops to the amount of work that we get in, because we don't want to, it is in our interest to shove as many shops into the subtract network as possible, but that is against the benefit of the shops themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about some things that could kind of help with that situation, but would add perverse incentives.
So,
So
yep.
I had another thought on that. So right now we can get away with a lot because we are a small group of trusted shops,
Mm-hmm.
and the name, the reputation, the community, like that counts for something right now. If we
Mm-hmm.
double in size, I don't want to say that's all going to be completely gone, but like we're going to have to think about these things and handle it a whole lot more carefully. It's one of the reasons why we haven't brought in any new shops yet, is because when we're small, we can be a little bit more loosey goosey about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a shop that I don't trust, like, am I going to pay them? Well, okay. A shop that I don't trust would not be in the subtract network. End of story. But If it's someone who I'm still in the earlier processes with building trust with, am I going to pay them up front? Yes, that's maybe not the best idea in the world. So no matter how careful your screening process is, no matter how many times you have an interview with them, no matter, if you meet them or not, some bad apples will get through, and we can
Well,
get away with it now because we're small, but we won't be able to later.
I wouldn't even say bad apples. Would you consider yourself to be a bad apple?
No,
Because I mean that's
but
kind of, I mean when your back's against the wall and you're trying to start something, you will make the decisions to try to keep your company going.
yeah,
And so even if the intention is there, people can form bad habits.
true.
And so it's not just about trusting the businesses, it's about creating an environment where people are successful and don't get themselves into situations where they've accepted stuff, accepted more than they can handle, and then spent the money and then have to give the job back.
So we should talk about this in like 3 months again, or even 2 months, and kind of come up with some better plans and ideas, because what we have in that regard just isn't mature yet, and for now that's fine, but it's going to quickly become a problem.
Mm-hmm. So, um, yeah. Let's see. We got another question from Protean Machining. As someone
Oh,
who is, huh?
wait, there's another one from Jacob in the Zencaster chat. Let's do them in order.
Oh, okay. Oh, and there's even one above that that I hadn't answered, which was from James about the buckets percentages.
I don't think it's in Zencaster chat yet.
Oh,
Jacob's
so
feeding them to us one at a time.
I got both opened. Maybe that's my problem.
I'm also watching that one, but
Okay. Well, I'll let you pick then. You go.
well, just the next question down. Adam at Langerman Machine says, and this is paraphrased, AJ, which is more stressful, teaching while building a new company or running a job shop? Teaching while building a new job shop, or teaching while building a new company, hasn't been that bad because Jacob and Scott have been so competent. Um, teaching, running a job shop wasn't that bad. Teaching while running a job shop, that was a little bad. So teaching plus job shop, stressful. Teaching while new company, not so bad. Job shop by itself, I mean, it has its highs and lows for sure.
Yeah.
But teaching with new company, not bad at all. Mostly because Jacob.
And then James, uh, what percentages do your buckets look like now compared to a year ago? Referring to the profit first method that we've been using. Pretty similar. We've only had a couple buckets change by about 5% or so. I couldn't tell you the exact numbers while looking off of it, but our OPEX savings, we just basically, or our savings, we basically just took from OPEX and we just moved, I remember if it was 5 or 10% over to from just general OPEX into an OPEX savings, because we were using OPEX for funding growth and we were running that bucket dry too quick. And so by splitting it out, we're making sure we have enough money to meet our business needs and then have money that's set aside for growth and buying
Yeah.
things like a Miss Collector.
Yeah. For
So
me, my OPEX has gone, my OPEX has gone up. My payroll has gone down, basically because I've pegged my pay at where it's been for the last year or so. I'm not increasing that right now, and like we're comfortable. I don't need to. But my jobs have become less material efficient, especially as I'm doing less zometry work. Because I was, for a while there running super, super, super material efficient, where I would just go look for jobs that could use the materials that I had on the shelf because I was cash strapped. And now, like, I've kind of settled into a more normal rhythm where I'm taking jobs and then buying the materials for them. So more OPEX, less pay for me because the overall percentage of money coming in has gone up. And so, but the amount of money I need has stayed the same.
yeah. One thing I will add on our percentages is we've been taking money from owner's pay as our gross income has gone up. We've been taking percentages of that and moving it over to OpEx as well. So in the beginning, owner's pay was a lot higher percentage, but as we grow, we don't need to take as much money out of the business to sustain ourselves. So we've been giving that money back into the business to help it grow and have more cash. So we've been dropping the owner's pay about 5% per year we've been in business. So, but we've still been taking home more money every single year.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it's not like we're shorting ourselves. We're just growing the business a little bit more.
Dylan asks, as someone who is obsessed or who is self-proclaimed, quote, obsessed with processes, end quote, how do you create a process to describe and test trust in the long term? And I have to imagine that this is about subtract again. Again, that is a very good question, and I can confidently answer that at the moment. The answer is I don't know. I don't know yet. This is something that's going to take a lot of thinking and probably some testing and probably some missteps. It's gonna, I'm sure, we're gonna get bitten eventually. I don't know yet. Um, the I could pull them up here. I do like I am willing to give people a chance, even if it is a little bit risky, because I think that's one of the ways you build trust is by like giving trust. Um, but I don't know yet. We'll figure that out. We've already nixed the idea of a partner score like Xometry does because that has some perverse incentives. Uh, it incentivizes shipping things on time in exchange for parts being good enough. Um, whereas I would rather parts ship a day late that were perfect than parts that were good enough shipping on time. And I mean, at this point, we're basically relying on human interactions and, relationships. Um, I think we will be able to ride on that for a little while because we can, for example, only let in shops that have a recommendation from another shop. That's probably how we'll do some of our earlier onboarding, but I don't know yet.
Yeah, and as for us on the processes side, we have processes and we train them, and we're training our employees with those processes. Documentation of said processes has been the current struggle, and it's something that needs to happen, but we have yet to have prioritized it. Uh, it's finding the time, and maybe that's something we just need to have the employees do as we're training them. That's something we've talked about, but we haven't done that yet. And to be fair, most of the processes that we're teaching them, I'm not sure if they're the types of processes that you would document. I mean, there's probably value in documenting them, but it's more like intro to machining, like teaching someone in class how everything works. Like you could have like a textbook that values all that stuff, but once they've used it once and they know it, there's not much value in going back to it except for some key points here and there which are worth documenting. But like the whole thing as a whole, once they're trained up, I don't know how much value there is into having it all documented.
I think there's more value than you think there is because, like, one, when you're training the next person, it's there and you can, show them and use that as a training aid.
Mm-hmm.
Two, if someone forgets how to do it, like they can just go back and look. And
Yeah.
it's very easy for us to be like, oh, it's really obvious how you load these parts. But, having taught a bunch of students at this point, I can tell you the things you think are obvious are not always obvious.
Well, then I'll be the first to admit that I like the idea of processes, but I'm also the first to throw them out the window whenever it's me versus whenever it's someone else. Just because if I need to get something out the door and I have a defined process, but I find a way that's slightly faster, slightly better, slightly whatever, I will change it on the fly. But I have less expectation of my employees or anyone else to do that once I have a process, I want them to follow it more than myself. That being said, I'll use an example of the processes that we have on our magwells. So whenever we have a fixture with our magwells that we're making, and we have op1 on the top and we have op2 on the side, and we need to remove the parts from the top and put them on the side and put new material on the top. The top gets torqued and the side gets torqued. Part of that process is making sure that the top is torqued and the side is torqued, because there's two different tools. We have a hand wrench that we use for loosening and then snugging them up, and then we grab the torque wrench and we tighten them down the rest of the way. Maybe it's getting rid of two different tools. Maybe that's a process change that we would need to make. But the way we have our torque wrenches set up, it's a lot easier to keep them. It takes a lot longer to use them than to use the regular wrenches to loosen everything up. And so one of the problems that we've run into is making sure that if you are setting up that pallet, that you torque whatever. If you're working on the top, you take them off, you put the new ones on, you snug them up, and then you torque them down. You got to make sure you torque them down before you walk away. And one of the processes that I've kind of developed, but we haven't really wrote down, is that if you do have to walk away from it and you haven't torqued them down, we leave the tool in the non-torquing tool, just the regular wrench, in the top of the fixture as a flag that they have not been torqued yet, as a visual indicator that they are not, it's not, that process is not complete. Because it's real easy to tighten them down but not torque them down and walk away and come back and then start working on the side and forget to tighten down the top. That's where we have the most failure. And so I could definitely see a process sheet going up. But there again, if you, even if you just have a sheet and it tells you stuff, make sure the top is torqued. Reading that or having that, you know, laminated and right there for the person to see, eventually they're going to ignore it and you're still going to have that problem. So how do you create a process that and document it to where it is then followed?
The process, well, for the most part, the process will never enforce itself. Now, some well designed, kind of lean pokey things
Mm-hmm.
can do that. I've always said that the processor should be easier to do than not, but it's like that becomes not a process problem. That becomes like a kind of more of a leadership thing. And as your job there as leaders to make sure the processes are being followed
Mm-hmm.
and to evaluate why they're not being followed if they're not being followed. Is the process dumb? Do we need to have some Kaizen foam on the table with numbers on it to show that things are going in order? Do we need to color code things, or do
Mm-hmm.
we just have a behavioral issue with the employee?
Well, it's not just the
Because if
employee. I mean, because me and Weston have both run into the problem. It's real easy if you're overloading yourself. So, for example, if I'm trying to run too many machines at once and I forget to tighten things down, that's when I've thrown a part. The first time our employee threw a part on that fixture, he's a part time employee, and his second job is, or his job he had before us was programming, and they had a production release, or a revision push out, and he was had too many things going in his head, and he thought he had tightened the top, but he hadn't tightened the top because he walked away from it because someone sent him an email, and then he came back and they weren't tightened down, and he stuck it on there, not realizing they weren't tightened down because his head wasn't in the game at that moment. So from a document, or maybe it's a pokey oak thing, and maybe that's where I get a little bit confused on processes versus, I don't know, something other than processes, just pokey oak, or other methods, the way you can know something is actually torqued down. And that's something that we're still working through with us and the employees to come up with to come up with a good process to make sure they are tight before you put them down, before you load it in there. And whether that's double checking it every single time, or in our mind, what we're trying to make sure is that whenever that pallet is done and it's sitting by the machine, no one needs to question that that pallet is done correctly. They need to be able to load it into the machine without thinking, did that fixture get loaded the right way? That's the goal, is that whoever's doing the loading of it is the one that's responsible. Whoever's changing the parts from the top to the bottom and loading material on the top is the one that's responsible for making sure that it's done properly, not the person who might be a different person who's coming behind and switching the pallets out whenever the machine stops, because that could be a different person, and that person doesn't need to be responsible for making sure that the fixture was done properly, because it'd be just like a robot at that point if a robot was loading it
Yeah.
and unloading it.
So why are you putting parts in your fixture and then like snugging them up without torquing them? Like, why don't you just use the torque wrench to actually put them in there?
Because it's a lot easier, because of the Mighty Bite clamps, you got to hold them in place and get them torqued down, and it's a lot easier to do that with the wrench than it is with the torque with the regular tool than the torque wrench. Because while you're trying to hold everything in place, it's a lot easier to do it with the smaller tool than it is with the torque wrench.
So what if you got a different torque wrench or redesigned your fixture where that wasn't an issue?
That's something we definitely could potentially do. We just haven't. I don't have a defense for that.
Because no one suggested it. Because lateral thinking is hard when you're in the moment.
Yeah,
and easy when you're Monday morning quarterbacking.
yeah, and that's stuff that I'm trying to let people let people know what the problem is and tell them to look for improvements, because just because this is how we have done it doesn't mean that it can't be done differently. But with the current tools that we have, that's the method that's the easiest to do from a user perspective.
In regards to creating processes, Dylan at Proteum reminds us, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get something without solving all, you can get something done without solving all of the what ifs. And it's a good starting point, if not fully functional on its own.
And I'm not trying to make anything perfect. I just don't know what to document in terms of like, this is the step. First, we take the top off and then we put it to the side. Or do I just put in their document, make sure the top's good and make sure the sides are good? Like, how detailed do you get in documenting that? Do you let people kind of come up with their own processes? Or do you go, okay, whenever you're doing this, you have to take the parts off the top and load the top, and then you have to do the ones on the side and like force it to be rigid? Or do you let people go, okay, here's the general problem, we need this fixture reloaded, we need to make sure that these points are hit, you can come up with your own steps in between what works for you, provided these things are met?
I would say yes, the process should be rigid, but you should give them the opportunity to fix it or improve it over time. So it's kind of like the phrase, strong opinions loosely held. Processes, I think, should be the same. You should be willing to change them in the face of evidence immediately, but they should also be the way things are done if there's no reason to change them.
I'll have to play with that some. It's definitely going to be a learning experience all of this is. Anyways, that's just a minor problem that we deal with. It's a very minor issue in the grand scheme of things. I think in terms of parts run, I think we'll run like 1,000 to 2,000 parts per failure. So it's a very minor issue. It just happens once in a while, and it's usually when someone is trying to do too many things at once. So it's not a big deal, but it's just a small example that I can talk about.
It's a good training wheels issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one to practice on before real issues come up. Producer Jacob asks, are there any reoccurring habits, good or bad, that have been easy for Harrison's new employees to fall into, or for AJ students to fall into? What are the most common? Well, I can start a little bit here.
Yeah, go ahead.
You need some time to think. So It's been different between the different groups I have. So I have like the DOC students and I have the like apprentice students, and they are noticeably different. I have started teaching the OODA loop for just like all of my regular machining classes, which is observe, orient, decide, and then act. My department of correction students are really, really good at the decide and act part, but they suck at the observe and orient side. So basically, they don't look at the context of what's going on around them. They don't look at what's in front of them. Sometimes, like not being able to see things that are very, very obvious. The apprentice the apprentice students I have come in, they are are generally really good at the observe and orient side, but they have a much more difficult time with the decide and act phases. So with my DOC guys, they just do things, whereas my apprentice students, they won't just do things.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
So with my guys, my intern is more willing to just get in there and try something, which means he is a lot more prone to mistake, and I have to be a lot more cautious with him and make sure that everything is set up and he doesn't make a mistake, because he will just do something if he thinks it's right. Versus my employee, he's a lot more detail oriented, and he will check with me if he has any hesitation about anything. And so I'm a lot more comfortable of letting him uh, go, and if he runs into a problem, he will bring it up and let me know before he scraps apart or has a problem. So, but yeah, I mean they're both doing a really good job, um, and they don't really have any bad habits. The biggest habit that the biggest problem I have with them is that the UMC, its cycles stop. They are not as attuned to the sounds of the shop when the machine stops, because their primary function. I have them learning stuff on the side, and I'm the first to admit that like they're there because the UMC was distracting to me to being able to do stuff. But at the same point, them running the UMC is why I have them there, and all the other training stuff that I'm doing around that is for them to focus. Like as soon as the UMC stops, that's when they need to go over and change that out, and then they can go back to learning whatever task I had them learning. And they're not very good at picking up when that machine stops. I usually have to yell at them, "Hey, the UMC stopped. Do you mind changing it out real quick?" before they get back to whatever they were learning or going through.
Yeah. My students definitely struggle with knowing if something doesn't sound right in the machine.
Yeah.
Even as simple as like when you're loading a part, like let's say it's an op2 that you're putting on parallels and you use a dead blow to smack it back down flat against the parallels after you tighten the vise. Like they can't hear when that's wrong, but I can. Or if the cut doesn't sound quite right. That's something that I'm very familiar with. I can listen to the machine and kind of tell how it's cutting. Something I do a lot, especially when I'm wearing headphones, is I will stick my hand or even my forehead kind of against the window of the machine so I can feel the vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they just like they don't have the context to know, oh, that's sounding a little bit chattery. I bet the part's flexing in the fixture, or that tool's dull, or whatever.
Yeah.
That is just an experience thing, I think, though. I don't know if you can teach that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being in tune with the shop, that's one thing that like watching these guys come in, I've realized how in tune with the shop I have gotten compared to them, for sure. Cuz like I can tell something, like I can tell any of the machines if something is like going wrong or has stopped running from my office with
Yeah.
doors closed and whatnot, and I can tell when something's done. And like I'll come walking out and be like, "Hey, can you do this?" And they're like, "How can you tell?" And
Yeah.
it's like because I've been living this world for so long that like I'm just in tune to like what's going on in the shop on a level that I don't expect they will ever get to, because it's not their baby.
Man, there was one day where my dad was in here doing some work and he had his impact driver and he wasn't using it all the time, but I'd be sitting here on my computer working, the machine would be running, and every now and then I would hear clunk, 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 and I would go running out to the shop to see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh, it was the
Mm-hmm.
impact driver.
Yeah.
Having something that throws off the rhythm of the shop can be, I don't know, annoying, distracting, whatever the word is.
Yeah. We were the first week our employee came in, we were running a part on the Doosan over lunch, and a tooth broke on the tool, and so it was making a loud noise because it was basically rubbing on the bottom of the tool as it was doing an adaptive cut. And it was less than a half a second between when that broke, because I was sitting down with my food to where I was out of my seat booking it across the shop trying to hit the e-stop button because a tool had worn out, to hit the e-stop button. And it was so funny because he was just like, whoa, that was quick.
Yeah.
It was just
It's
like,
like
yeah.
there's a good clip of John Saunders during one of his classes, one of his training classes,
Mm-hmm.
like sliding halfway across the shop and hitting the stop button.
Yep. Yep. That's basically what happened because we were all three sitting down for lunch, and then the bottom of that tool went, and I just booked it so fast. Nothing was hurt. It was just loud, and it could have been bad, but it was funny. It was funny. So
Dylan at Prodium again asks, what has having employees or students taught you the most about yourselves? Dylan with the hard hitting questions.
yeah, Dylan, dang, he's not taking it easy on us tonight, but I like it. I appreciate it.
I can let you think a little bit more while I talk here. It's definitely shown me some of the things that I am bad at and helped me correct for them. A good example is going back to dial indicators. I knew how to use a dial indicator and I knew how to, use it to trim in a vise or whatever. But I was spending, like, I would always have to check, like, wait, the needle's moving this way. Does that mean that the part's getting closer or farther away from me? And when I was doing it by myself, that was something that I could just be like, poke the needle and see which way it moves and go, okay, this is the way I need to move. But when with a class, my students were getting confused, and it was like, well, okay, they're getting confused because I'm doing a bad job teaching this because, I don't really understand it well enough myself. And that's, kind of solidified, okay, if the needle is going to the right, that means the needle is getting pushed farther. If the needle is going to the left, that means it's being pushed less. And, suddenly my students had a lot less issue learning that because, I was teaching it better because I understood it better myself. And there have been a couple things like that. True position on a hole. And, that was something that I understood until I started having to do lectures on it. And then it's like, okay, my understanding is not as clear about this as it should be. And it's confusing my students. So let me go dig into this for a little bit and, make some notes about how to teach this better. And, like that helped me understand it a lot better.
I draw parallels to training these my employees similar to what it was like in school, going through engineering school, in the fact that, like, if someone would ask me a question and I would helping them figuring out a math problem, I would end up learning more from that interaction of, like, verbally going through it with someone else than the person I was trying to help. And there's definitely been several instances where I will go to explain something and think about something deeper than I have in the past because I'm having to explain it to someone else. And so, I've had a couple of epiphanies about things that weren't related to what I was teaching them, but helped me with other problems that I've had in the past and just reframing past problems. And then the other thing that I've seen is that while we do have processes, and I'll use that term loosely because I obviously don't know what I'm talking about on that area, I have noticed that some of those processes, we've given them the freedom to, like, this is what needs to get done. Do you have your own if you have your own way of doing it, to try it. And I have seen kind of 50-50. Some of the times it's like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. And I like that for like improving the process. And then other times it's like, do not do that. That is a horrible addition to this process. And so it's good to see new ideas being generated for how to do stuff. And I don't want that to go away. I want the fresh perspectives, but knowing when to implement them and when to disregard them is going to be the hard part.
So Murray asks, this is specifically for Harrison. Your dad is a pilot. Aviation has a phenomenal track record when it comes to processes and training. Can your shop learn from pilot training / processes / certifications? Your dad's a
So
pilot? I didn't know that.
yeah, my dad is a pilot, and Weston is a pilot, and my uncle's a pilot. I'm the only one that's not so
Slagger?
far. So yeah, Weston is extremely process oriented, and I think a lot of that comes from pilot stuff. My dad is not, unless you're talking about planes. So my dad and my uncle, both who've been pilots since they were like 18 years old, basically their whole lives, as soon as they were able to get one, outside of a plane, are not process oriented at all. Weston is, but my dad and my uncle, absolutely not. They are redneck engineering everything. No processes anywhere. But when it comes to planes and processes, there's no one that I wouldn't trust more in that area than my dad. And just a fun anecdote or a fun story about something that I've gone through with my dad as a pilot. Um, I've had two scares flying in a small private plane, and both times my dad has been the pilot, and both times I should have been scared for my life, but I wasn't because of the processes that my dad followed in those situations. So one time we were flying up in a plane that my dad has restored a couple planes over the years, and this was a plane that he had done some work on, and we were flying, and spontaneously the dash started bellowing smoke out of it while we were flying. And when the plane's, basically on fire, that's the time to freak out. And that's when, my dad's training would kick in, and he would follow the processes to get us down safely. And it ended up being that some wires shorted out and it had killed some of the gauges in our cluster, but it wasn't anything that actually caught fire. It was just electrical smoke basically coming out. But as a kid, I had complete trust in my dad to do that through the processes. And then we had another time where we were flying back, and we hit an ice storm, and we built up 2 inches of ice on the leading edge of the plane. And it was a small single engine plane. We had our whole family in it with all of our luggage, so we were very heavy, and we were in the Ozark Mountains. And so we had to descend to a level that was actually lower than the hills that we were in. Very scary for most members of my family, specifically my mom. But
your dad was probably having a blast, though.
no, he was not. He was sweating bullets, but he he had his processes that he followed through, and he got us. He had to get us down to an altitude where the ice would start melting to get out of the clouds, and which put us at risk of hitting a mountain. But he was following his maps and everything, and got us and landed us safely. And it was, I have a photo somewhere where I took a photo, and there was only about an inch left of ice, but at one point it was 2 inches while we were up there. It was just crazy. But as my dad would
Type
say,
2 fun.
Yeah. As my dad would say, flying is what is it? Many hours of boredom followed by minutes of sheer terror. And so, yeah, I trust him in a plane. I don't know if I trust him with processes around the shop. Short answer that I made long.
I think Jacob's trying to get us to wrap up here. I have some kind of general questions. or a thought. I don't know, question, thought, whatever this is. And I'm kind of directing this more at Dylan from Pronium. I have been trying to learn more about like the business finance, money management side of running a business. And I'm having a really, really hard time finding good information about it. And I'm kind of wondering if there is a somewhat lack of financial fluency in like our specific machine, little corner of the machining community, or if it just doesn't get talked about for some reason. Dylan, have you seen any of that? Or is this just me? Or is this just how everything is everywhere, where there's like, the little bean counter sitting in the corner and they just don't talk very much and they keep their own little secrets? Because I've had a terrible time. Like there's profit first. We talk about that. I can't think of like any other thing that's like, you know, financially related that we talk about on a regular basis.
I feel like money talks in general, at least in the public settings, not necessarily machining in particular, is almost a taboo subject for most people. They just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, and I understand that, but like you could talk about cash flow management without talking about your numbers.
I know, but some people have
Um,
a hard time doing that.
yeah. Dylan says most machinists don't have MBAs. True. The most learning he's had to do is from owning a business, or the most learning he's had to do is owning the business and business stuff. Um,
That's how most people are, I'd imagine.
and these, like I said, I'm trying to make Subtract a mature business more from the beginning, and this is what I'm trying to sort out. But like, there's not a lot of it.
I think
I think what I really need to do is sit down and quarter my dad and be like, okay, father, we are going to have coffee every Saturday morning, and you're going to teach me business, because this is what is invested as I am in machining. He was in business, so he was a executive at AT&T. He has been the CFO of several nonprofits. He used to teach entrepreneurship classes, and and sorry, Jacob left a comment that I googled at. And he's helped with like the taxes and stuff, but he's probably actually intentionally made this choice to not be meddlesome, knowing my dad. But it's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to learn more here. So Dylan says finding a mentor from places like Score can be really helpful. Yes, that is something that I have been
what's
Googling basically,
what's
but not
Score?
actually gotten into. It's like the Chamber of Commerce, basically.
Oh,
I think so. I don't know, or it's related. I know
interesting.
that the Muncie Chamber of Commerce has things in place for that. I don't know exactly what Score is, I guess.
Yeah, on finances, like a couple books, and my grandpa who had a successful business for.
Service Corps of Retired Executives. Maybe I
Huh.
didn't know what that was. I was thinking of something else.
Um, my grandpa's the closest one to a business, running a business, and the finances of business that I've been able to really talk to about this kind of stuff. Apart
Huh.
from any books I've been able to find.
Score is not what I was researching. Okay, I'm gonna have to do more googling on that. Yeah, I was looking at like the SBA type business stuff, but okay, Score. That's a thing to Google. I don't know. If I learn stuff, I'll talk about it. But right now, I don't know enough to do YouTube videos into or whatever.
Yeah, that's a whole. I mean that's something I'd definitely be interested to look into. I've always wanted to have a good mentor in this industry that I could learn from, and that's kind of what I listen to the other podcasts for. Is they're kind of my mentorship of other people going through the same thing. Um, and one quote that I think it was John Saunders said, and I'm sure he read it in a book somewhere, is that like advice is contextual,
Yeah,
and so even with all of these resources, the advice that they give is um, it can vary, depend, like it might apply to you today, but it might apply to you in 10 years. And so I've definitely seen advice that I've ignored or heard, and I was just like, okay, cool. And then I think about it again at a later date, and it's like, okay, now it really freaking applies. And now is when I need to hear that in my life so I can remember it and apply it.
On a related note, if anybody has good finance book recommendations, send them to me, and I'll read them, and I can make a list. Not on our website because that doesn't exist anymore. But
yeah, we need like a good. We kind of need the website just for like, even if it's not having the
transcripts,
just to have other general information on.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't got anything else unless anyone else has any questions before we head out. And AJ says no to questions. So question time is closed. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out live with us. And those that are watching the recording, thanks for hanging out with us as well. This has been a typical podcast, meaning disjointed and unplanned. But we appreciate you guys hanging out and listening to it. And hopefully you learned something. If not, I'm sorry for wasting an hour and a half of your time. Anyways, this has been Harrison with Precision Ingenuity signing out with AJ from Audacity Micro and Subtract Manufacturer. We'll catch you guys next time. Taps and patience, our daily grind. In this machine shop, we'll always find joyous struggles, all intertwined. Taps and patience, one of a kind.